So my son is up here in case anyone comes.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Matt Adams. I'm the president of the Visual Arts Alliance. Founded in 1981 as an all-volunteer arts nonprofit, VAA seeks to provide education and exhibition opportunities for Houston area artists and collectors. We do this through a number of types of activities, such as monthly educational programs, the one that we're hosting today. We also produce juried exhibits of artwork, both of our members and the overall community. We have monthly critique nights and we have monthly socials. It's a lot to keep up with, I know, so I encourage you to follow us on Facebook, sign up for our newsletter on our website,
No, I'm Catherine.
which is free to everyone, as is all our activities. Everything is free and open to the public. So it is a great organization, I think. I encourage you to check it out for yourself, and I would love to meet you in person. Obviously, we are doing this as a virtual online program this month. The great benefit is that it will live on in perpetuity on our YouTube page. But for those of you who are joining us live, you have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat box, please. Catherine will take those questions at the end. Also, following all the questions, I will give you an up-to-date account of what's going on in the organization. But for now, I would like to turn it over to our programs chair, James Booker, who will introduce our speaker today. James?
Yes, hi. Yes, thanks for joining us. So today we have Catherine Couturier from the Catherine Couturier Gallery. Today she'll be sharing the brief history of the history at her gallery, as well as the current exhibition with Maggie Taylor. So without further ado, Catherine Couturier.
Hi, everybody. It was nice. Someone just walked into the gallery as y'all were making an introduction, and it's someone from VAA who didn't realize the event was virtual. So we have a virtual crowd and an in real life crowd. So that's fun and unexpected. The gallery is open today, so you may hear the door chime go off every now and then. I hope you do, because that'll mean people are coming in to see the show. So as James said, I'm Catherine Couturier of Catherine Couturier Gallery. We are a fine art photography gallery in Houston. There's only 2 galleries currently that only handle photography. It's us and a gallery called Photo Relevance that some friends of mine opened, which is great because I would like it to be that there is more photography everywhere in Houston. Right. So there is Houston Center for Photography, which also is it's a nonprofit, but it's dedicated to photography. And the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston actually has the largest photography collection in the country. A curator named Ann Tucker started it in the 70s from nothing and grew it to be what it is today. So definitely, if you're interested in photography, always make sure you're going to the Museum of Fine Arts and seeing what shows they have up and what pieces from the collection they're showing, because there is a lot of really great stuff. The Menil also has a good collection of photography. It was never the focus of the Menil, but they usually try to put some photographs up. So look for those when you go to the Menil collection as well. The last one that's a big organization is PhotoFest, which holds, every other year holds portfolio reviews, and artists come in from all over the world to have their work shown and seen at PhotoFest. So also be sure and check them out and see where they're having different shows. As for my gallery, I don't have a very good established by date because I started working for a gallery in the same space focused on photography in 1999 called John Cleary Gallery. And I worked for John Cleary and I ran his gallery for 8 years until he unfortunately was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died really suddenly. So I came to work one day. I always brought my children. So my son was like 18 months. He was on my hip and I walked into work and John said, "We need to talk. It's not diabetes, it's pancreatic cancer. I'm gonna be dead in a month. You need to figure out what we're doing about this gallery." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I don't want to talk about it. You're smart, figure it out." So in the span of those 4 weeks, he needed a will that he didn't have, an estate needed to be set up, a trust, and we had to come up with what we were going to do, because we have so many artists that really have made a really big impact in Houston, Maggie Taylor being one of them. But John was the only photography gallery, and, it would have left such a void really in the art scene in Houston. So we came up with a plan of how I would buy the gallery, and it was all, as I said, very, very sudden. So while I had expected that I would own a gallery one day, I was not expecting it to be when I was 30, and it just kind of dropping in my lap. But that's what happened. So I've been literally sitting at the same desk since 1999. I became the owner of the gallery in 2008. And then I changed it to my name in 2012. So I've owned the gallery for 14 years, but I've been working here for 22 in one way or another. A lot of the artists, we kept on basically as though nothing had changed. But of course, for me, everything had changed. I mean, I knew how to run a gallery, but I didn't know how to fund a gallery. I didn't know about cash flow. I didn't know what bills were what. So it was definitely a tough learning curve. But I learned. And 2008 is when the gallery became mine, and we had a really good summer. And then Ike hit, and I didn't sell a single photograph that month because no one had power. If everybody remembers Hurricane Ike, and then the economy died. So then I really had to learn a lot about business, because if you've been running a business and money just keeps coming in, it's very easy. But once you have to really start figuring out how to run a business that isn't constantly just full of money, that's a very different skill set. It's definitely most people, and if most of you are artists, you probably run into this. Most people assume that if you're an artist and you're working, then you must be a millionaire. And they assume if you're an art dealer, you must be a billionaire. But as anyone who's been in the art business for a long time knows, that it's kind of feast or famine, and most years are famine more than feast. That being said, I am completely in love with my job. I get to have a very fulfilling life because I'm an art dealer. I get to spend a lot of time with my children. They can come up here if they need to, because, it's not as though there's 100 people in here at all times. During the early days of the pandemic, it was great because it's the easiest place in the world to social distance, because it's big and empty for the most part, with just beautiful things on the wall. The early days of the pandemic taught me a lot too. I needed to come up with ways to show my artist's work without people coming in, and coming up with a clever idea or two about how to, just make interesting blog posts and things like that. So I'm always trying to think of new ways, especially as the world changes, like the pandemic, or as technology changed, which in photography was a huge, there's a huge difference between when I started and there was basically no digital anything. There was no email. We were still showing work with slides and a loop whenever we needed to show other pieces. To get an announcement card made took about 6 months. We had to have the fine art photograph. It would have to get scanned. There were only, I think, 2 scanners in Houston on a drum scanner. It would usually ruin the print. And then that would have to be turned into a slide, which would have to be turned into a halftone, which would then be printed. Now, of course, I have so many images on the internet that doesn't take any time. And if I need an announcement card made, I ask my artist for a high-res file, I email it to the printer, and I've got an announcement card. Another major change in photography was, of course, how photography could be produced. Maggie Taylor, the show that we're opening today, is a really good example of that. When you look back at the work Maggie was making in college and during her MFA, she was basically doing this type of work, but she was having to do it physically in a darkroom. So she was using multiple negatives and trying to create what she ended up creating. But with the advent of Photoshop, she could start to really do what she'd always wanted to do with photography. And as that program got better and better and better, her work could get more and more and more complicated because she had the tools. So that has been a really interesting thing to see in the history of photography while I've been an art dealer. Another thing that's been fantastic about the digital age for photography is that one of the reasons black and white photography was so so much more collected than color photography is that producing a color photograph was really expensive and the processes weren't good. They weren't stable, meaning the colors would shift, they would fade. So for an artist, you're going to spend way more money to make something that's not as good, you know? So digital technologies and color are absolutely the best that color photography has ever been. Which is, you know, just so fantastic to have something that's that much more archival, that much more stable, something that's going to last that much longer. So it opened up for a lot of artists who wanted to work in color to work in color. So yes, so I'm trying to think of what else I need to tell you about the history of the gallery. So we are technically open by appointment, but we're about to be back to regular gallery hours, probably next month. I'm here almost every day, as is the gallery director. So usually you can just come by, but if you want to check, you can always call or just send us an email. We get them very, very quickly and we can schedule an appointment. We're open today with our new show from 11 to 4, and we're doing a book signing with Maggie Taylor from 2 to 4. So she'll be here that you can chat with her or pick up her new book, which we will talk about in the, once I pull up my PDF about Maggie Taylor. Is there anything else interesting about my gallery or my job? The gallery is a member of APAD, which is the Association of International Photographic Arts Dealers, which is a members only organization. And we produce an art fair every year that's the best art fair for photography in the country. That happens in May this year in New York. It's a really great thing to be a member of because while the only major thing that a lot of people know about APAD is the photography show that we do, from the dealer side, it's incredible to be a part because I have such a team, really. We all kind of work together. And since I'm a little bit isolated here in Houston, as opposed to if you're in New York and there's 60 other photography galleries, I have a community of people who know what I'm going through, but also if I'm looking for a vintage piece, I can email this group and say, hey, does anybody have a Half Dome by Ansel Adams? I've got a client looking. And then I get the emails back from whoever has them. Again, that's a plus of the digital era. When I started, I would have had to just pick up the phone and make 50 phone calls to try to find work, which of course would take my entire day up. So I don't miss those days whatsoever, even though I do like talking to my dealer friends. But let's go ahead and go into talking about Maggie Taylor. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Here we go. So the show is called Internal Logic. A lot of Maggie's work has to do with philosophical and psychological ideas. She was actually a philosophy major at Yale for her undergrad. And while she doesn't usually tell anybody what the idea is behind any piece, but the titles sometimes give you a clue every now and then. But also Maggie has said that when she needs to start working on a piece, she kind of has an idea, but she just starts working. And I think that's true for a lot of artists that I've met. that they kind of know they have to get up and they need to work. One of the things I tell artists a lot of times when I'm giving these talks is that, like, my biggest advice to artists in general is, if you want this to be your job, you need to treat it like a job. You need to work a lot. You need to be professional. You need to make sure that anytime you are dealing with dealers or collectors or anything else, that you're professional. I mean, that idea that artists are flaky and flighty and, you know, don't get up and stuff like that is actually not true of any artist that actually is successful. So while unfortunately I think most people have to have, you know, a different type of job a lot of times, especially when they're starting out, you got to make the time to do the art too, because if you're not making art, how are you going to be an artist? And Maggie's an incredibly good example of that. Maggie gets up and at 9 o'clock, she goes in her studio at 9 a.m. She comes out and has lunch, and then she goes back in her studio till about 4 or 5. And so she works this full time. The pieces take her each about 4 to 6 weeks to create. It's one of the reasons that I saw Maggie's work for the first time in 2001, so very, very, very early with digital work, and it blew me away. I had never seen anything like it. And even now, when a lot of people are trying to do this type of kind of photo-based digital collage, it's really rare that you see anybody who's as good as Maggie, because she can get a three-dimensionality that I think most people can't achieve. And it's because she does put in so much time and so many hours. Hi, how are you? As I said, we're open, so people may be coming in. My 15-year-old is running the gallery while I'm doing this interview. But because Maggie's so skilled, but also because she puts the time in, she puts the work into these pieces. This is not something that she, you know, takes some photographs and just sticks them together. It is not like that at all. That being said, she usually starts with a figure, which you can, this piece that we use for our announcement cards, a very good example of it. Usually it's something Victorian era, so a tintype, a daguerreotype, something like that. And she scans that into her computer. She has a large network of people that let her know when great tintypes or daguerreotypes are coming on the market. And she keeps her eyes open for really good source material like that. So she'll scan that in. She'll, you know, hand paint a little bit here and there. She scans in other photographs to make the backgrounds, and then starts taking photographs. So in this one, she has a whole collection of miniatures. So she'll photograph these little miniatures. She also takes images in museums and uses pieces of, you know, famous artworks. She does, you know, uses found imagery, and then she'll, you know, start to work. So, you know, in this one, you can kind of see, you know, through here, that ripple. Well, so she may, I don't know for sure, but she may have just, you know, dropped a pebble and taken the picture of the ripple it caused. Same thing with kind of the edge of the water. The reflections of the animals, if you notice, all those little details, you know, that takes a lot of work and a lot of skill. And then she gets to a point where she says it's done and she walks away, which I've got to assume is very, very difficult when it is, there's so much small details in her work. One of her most famous images is called Girl with a Bee Dress. And the posturing of the girl, she didn't like, she liked the head and the tintype, but not the body. And so she actually took a self-portrait to get the figure part that she wanted. So this is her latest series. It's called Internal Logic, as I said, which is also the title of her new book, which she is signing today from 2 to 4. And the show will be up through the end of May. So if you can't check it out today, check it out some other time. This is a copy of the book. She also likes to do a limited edition of the book that I think in this case it's 200, and it comes with a print. So it'll come with an 8-inch photograph. There's 4 options. And so you get kind of a book with a print and in a really fancy clamshell, and it's really neat. So we have the trade editions, of course, but we will have these as well. This is Maggie in her studio. She lives in Gainesville, Florida. She is originally from outside Cleveland. As I said, went to Yale for her undergrad and then moved to the University of Florida for her MFA. And she stayed in Gainesville ever since. So she, as I said, she gets up and she works, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. She has been in, more museum collections than we can count, more museum shows and, nonprofit shows, and she's got galleries all over the world. A lot of people mention that her work kind of reminds them of Alice in Wonderland. And she did actually take Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and kind of re-illustrated both. She went and looked kind of through the history of the illustrations for those stories and came up with her own. So there, if you go to the website, you'll see links for both of those under her artist page. And it's really neat to see what Maggie Taylor did with Humpty Dumpty, for example, or the Walrus or the Mad Hatter, because, at the end of the day, to see her take her type of work, but have this real inspiration point that's really tied to a story was really great for all of us who are big fans. Here's a couple of the images that are on our main wall. We've already talked about the gathering a little bit on the left, and on the right is one called Spring Break. So you start looking around, and again, just like with all of her work, there's just more and more details the more you look at them. And then you do see, you go, okay, she figured out where the reflections need to be, what's happening over here? What's flipping up? What's diving down, but they're fun and they're very, very clever. Especially I'd say a lot of the ones that are animal based, most all of her images either have a main figure or they have an animal. And a lot of times there's a lot of crossover there. I've got a couple of slides here just to give an example of how she starts working and how they just keep changing until that she gets what she wants. The image on the left shows kind of how she started with this monkey. And she kind of, went ahead and put the mirror in. She went ahead and put the telephone in. And she actually used these magnolias in a different image ultimately. So it could be that her putting the magnolias above this monkey is actually what inspired the next piece that we'll see. But there's so many great little details. I forget, and I don't think I can see it. Right here on the inside of the rotary dial on the telephone, it says something and I can't see it at the moment, but I know it's one of the responses from a Magic 8 Ball because I have a Magic 8 Ball on my desk. So if you come in the gallery and have a burning question, but this one's called Welcome to My Office. But if you really look, you can see he's basically taking a selfie. So he's got his phone in his hand, and then you can trace that cable to go into the typewriter, and then look, a little portrait's coming out. So a lot of times the title will give you a clue, but if you look, you can usually tell that something else is going on as well. This is the piece I referenced in the last one. So you can see she still has that kind of halo in the clouds of the magnolias, but it didn't work in Welcome to My Office. So she, was working on this one as well, Dreaming with Open Eyes. And again, you can see how she kind of gets the background, but she changes it. She's kind of got the pig on the pillow, but it changes and the more she works on it. You can also see the difference, I think, in those magnolias, the difference in the kind of three-dimensionality as she works and works and works. Same thing on the background. On the left, it's kind of a hill, and on the right, you can see really far into that water and the clouds in the back and everything else. So just more and more depth, more and more details. The next one's The Adventure, which is another good example of just seeing where she starts and where she goes. Sometimes she'll have, 10 or 15 different iterations of an image and then just figure out which one she likes best. But there's usually some type of thought at the very beginning that she keeps up with. This is one of my favorite pieces in the show, but we have really good examples of this. So this is Me, Myself, and I. So you'll see that every one of the pieces that she did has that little mouse in a skirt, which is a mice are a big running theme in Maggie's work. She said that was something she always had dreams about, and they make their way into her work a lot. So you can see that that mouse is in all of the examples. That kind of three-headed cup is in all the examples, but everything else she kind of, you know, worked until she found it exactly like she wanted it to be. So I'll leave this slide up for a little bit if anybody would like to take kind of closer looks. I'm not sure that I can zoom in, if that helps at all, seeing some of the fine details. But again, her sense of perspective is so good. So this is not, you know, taking images and then just sticking them together, not by a long shot. And so again, you know, she had the door in all of them, but when you get to the final, oh, sorry about that. When you get to the final one, the door's gone. So even if she was keeping that door and keeping that door and keeping that door, at the end of the day, it didn't work and she cut it out. Here's another two that have some running themes. Quoi? Yeah. Sorry, my son's asking me a question about the books. So ask your father and he will pull out a signed book and you can run the invoice. As I said, my 15-year-old is in charge right now, which he's very good at lots of things in the gallery. He's not usually the salesman, but only for a matter of time. He's going to be good at it soon. Again, boats are a big recurring theme in Maggie's work, as in the If I Had a Boat on the right. I like that title the best out of the show because it is the title of my favorite Lyle Lovett song. And I keep forgetting to ask Maggie if that's where she got it, but I've got to assume it is. If you do not know If I Had a Boat by Lyle Lovett, you should look it up. It's a great song. Let's see. I liked these two together as well when we were putting together images for this presentation. So Night Trippers on the left and In Good Company on the right. Again, you can just kind of keep looking at them and see kind of the crackling of the kind of paint in the sky or on the edges of the one on the right. And again, that same depth perception in the one on the right, the In Good Company, when you see, you know, kind of the zebras in the background and the same kind of little lantern being repeated, but details. She also, per kind of new series, a lot of times she's working in sort of the same color palette, which is great because a lot of color artists, their work doesn't necessarily go together because they're very bold colors, which of course is great. But what's good for artists in general, if you're trying to really make a name for yourself, is your work needs to be recognizably yours. If you're changing your palette all the time, if you're changing your subject matter all the time, if you're changing the size, the shape, everything like that, how are people going to know it's yours? You can walk into a room and know that this is Maggie Taylor. I think that's the hardest thing really for an artist to figure out, is how to really have their unique voice. And that takes a lot of work on the artist's part, but that really usually leads to a more successful career. Another two favorites, Kindred Spirits on the left and Navigation Without Names on the right. Again, you see kind of the water, you see the boats, a lot of the same imagery that she uses over and over again. Navigation Without Names also has a compass, which pops up a lot in hers. And actually the seaweed around the neck reminds me of one of her most beloved images, which is called Twilight Swim, that's been sold out forever. And I would jump at the chance to buy that back anytime someone has one for sale. Again, you'll see in Kindred Spirits on the left, that same kind of striped pattern she was doing before with the zebras and so forth. This little dog pops up a lot too in her work. These are the ones that you can see slightly tilted looking behind me. The hostess and the magician. A lot of times she does these pairings, kind of a female and a male. And this is a really great example of those. They're available individually, but a lot of times people buy them as a pair. And as much as they look kind of matching, when you really get down to the details, they're not. You know, that it maybe is the same window, but the clouds are all different. The shape of actually the woman's skirt and the man's skirt, I guess, for lack of a better term, aren't exactly the same shape either, but it's the same floor. It's mostly the same background, but it's really the color palette and the positioning of the bodies and everything that makes you know that this is a couple in a way. But again, very, very different animals used and different details. The one on the left has a lot of moths flying around it, and that's a recurring theme in Maggie's work as well, moths and butterflies. She actually has a whole collection of dead moths. Be weird to have a collection of live moths, I guess. And she'll take them and put them directly on her scanner to get all those different shapes and colors and everything else. So that's what she would have done in this one. Another good one, The Logic Within. Very different from a lot of the other ones in the show, although you can see that kind of skirt, you know, and that shape that she's using in other images. The clouds show up. A lot of the details that are in some of the other pieces are hanging in the skirt of this piece. So you can see the shell from Navigation Without Names. You can see a clock. You can see the little boats. So the more and more you look at Maggie's work, the more you see these same bits and pieces kind of showing up over the last 20 years, which is fun to follow that kind of progression. I love this one. The world is hanging from a chain, and so is the moon, and this great depth background. You know, it looks like kind of European, you know, Eastern European with castles and everything else. It's great. And that is all I had for this show, because those are the pieces that are in this exhibition. Everything's better in real life, just in general. This is all the gallery's information, which of course is easily found on our website, which is catherinecouturier.com. And one of my hesitations about changing the name originally was that my name is so hard to spell, but Google got very smart. And so if you even kind of put in my name into Google and put fine art photography or Houston, you'll get right there. So don't worry too much about the spelling. Let's see what else. I said that we're having a book signing with Maggie herself from 2 to 4 today. So if you have any questions or would like to meet her, today's the day. So come see us on Gallery Row in Houston. What else do I have? I talk very quickly, so I hope that everyone could follow what I was saying. I try very hard to speak slowly. It is not my nature. And that combined with my East Texas accent, I know can sometimes make it hard. So everyone can feel free to ask questions, even if you just needed a little clarification on something I said too quickly. Other questions that people have in general about Maggie is about editions. They always say, is this an original? Well, in photography, there's no such thing as an original. The whole point of photography was to be reproduced and for there to be more than one copy. So Maggie, in her case, they're editioned on the front of the pieces, and you can see them even in the mats. And of the 8-inch prints, it's an edition of 15. The 15-inch prints, it's an edition of 15. The 22s, it's an edition of 10. And the 36-inch is an edition of 9. So the entire edition per piece is 49. One of the problems we run into in photography, and if you decide to collect photography, a good question to always ask, there's no right way to do an edition, but there's also no right way to write down an edition unless you only have one size. Because if Maggie put on the 22-inch that it's an edition of 49, well, it's not, because there's not going to be 49 in that size. There's only going to be 10. But when you write down that it's only 10, then the question is, are there only 10 of this image? No. That's why you always can just ask that question and a dealer will give you the answer. Another question I get a lot about editions is, well, how do we know they're not just going to keep making them? And my answer is always that most people are ethical, but also any good gallery would drop an artist immediately if they started doing those sorts of things, because an edition really is a promise more than anything else. It says, I promise you there won't be more than this. More than likely, there'll be a lot less because most editions don't sell out. So it may be that, you know, only 5 sell in every image, but there's no way to know that. All you know from the piece on the wall is that this is edition 2. Well, edition 1 may have been destroyed. They may never print again. So you may have a unique piece. I mean, that stuff's hard to fall, to really know anything from the edition, but it's just a promise from the dealer and the artist that there's not gonna be more than that. And I think that's it. I'd love to turn it over for questions. Huh?
Yes, I have a question actually. Actually, I have 2 questions. And then because you brought up the concept about having like originals and stuff like that. As a gallery owner, do you feel like it's important for artists to have originals, like to have that just original piece?
I mean, it kind of comes up with what's your idea of original. I mean, if you're doing a painting and you're making prints from it, then you have to decide, is the painting actually a piece of art and the prints are just prints of that piece? Or is your painting kind of source material and the prints are the piece? So it kind of depends. I mean, Maggie, there are original, like one-of-a-kind photographs that sometimes she has and scans in. But is that her work? No, this is the work. And it only really exists before it's printed as a digital file. And then that's a whole nother discussion of, you know, how files have to be kept and long-term, how they're going to be stored and things of that nature, you know, that how much are museums going to kick in about, you know, file storage and file protection, because of course, digital files don't last forever either. And as technology changes, all those things kind of have to change too. And technology changes so quickly now, I think, as we all know. But in your case, James, like if you had a painting and then you sold prints from it, more than likely we would have either a show of the paintings or we'd have a show of the prints. And only because you don't want it to, you just have to make it all make sense at the end of the day. If you, it could be that you had all the paintings on the wall, but the prints were also available. And then obviously they'd be a different price. But again, you would need really to kind of have an edition. As I said, it's kind of a false constraint at the end of the day because editions really don't mean anything, but collectors like them. So edition your work if you're making multiples. It does not have to be an edition of 2. I actually hate that. The whole point of being able to reproduce things is to be kind of very democratic about it, where I can love this photograph and I can have it, Matt can have it, James can have it. And isn't that nice? Like, isn't that great that it's not just that you have to see it in a museum, you can actually own one and put it in your house and see it in a museum.
And I guess how many they reproduce, I guess that's up to the artist, that's up to the gallery. I'm sure the gallery owner or curator whatnot has some say, not some say so, but I guess maybe some suggestions or some input into that.
Definitely.
How many?
Definitely.
Like 5 to 20 maybe or something. I wouldn't know.
So, I mean, there's definitely kind of 2 types of art galleries out there. There's kind of art galleries that are really run by art dealers who are buying and selling and helping clients build collections and getting getting works into museums, and back before self-publishing, getting book projects and helping really guide an artist's career. And then there's people that just sell stuff, right? So it's a shop at the end of the day. I'm an art dealer. So my artists call me for advice all the time. So about pricing, about editions, about sizing, about what decisions they should make for their career, because that's my job. And my job is to help my clients and help build their collections, but it's also to help my artist. And as I said, everyone who calls themselves an art dealer is that's not necessarily what they do. That is what I do, because that's my job. I mean, the artists usually have an idea of pricing and editioning by the time they get to me, because I don't really deal with emerging artists. But my artist, Patty Carroll, we've had 2 price increases since I started handling her because she massively undervalued her work. And that's my job, you know, is to kind of help artists not make a bunch of mistakes, because undervaluing your work so much. Like if you sell a photograph for $20, they're going to think it's worth nothing. But if you take something that one day you thought was $20, the next day you decide it's $20,000, well, then you've priced yourself out too. So that's about knowing your market, knowing what your collectors want and expect. And the same thing's true of editions. But professionals can always give you advice, and you can always just, you know, Google an artist you really respect and think is having a really good career and say, okay, well, what is this artist doing with their prints? I mean, there's some really great printmakers in Houston that you could definitely talk to. There's an artist that I've bought things from that does woodcuts and things named Ricky Armendariz out of San Antonio. Fantastic artist. And so, you know, a lot of times just find yourself dealers and things like that, those professionals, but also find artists that are having the career you're having and talk to them about, you know, how they got there. Having a community of like-minded artists to help you, like VAA and other organizations, can be really, really helpful. It's also, let's say that you've only ever printed on one type of paper and they discontinue that paper. Well, then you're going, oh crap, what do I do? Well, you could just put it in the group that you're in and say, okay, I was using this paper. Has anyone found a good replacement? And usually they have, and they'll just give you that information.
Okay. I guess my other question was, as a owner, is there like a certain type of work that you go for? Do you more so go for like just pretty pictures, or are you looking for something with like a theme or like a concept or an idea?
So, I mean, I always kind of say I have to look for things that I can sell. So there's kind of three things that I really need before I would ever consider working with an artist. One is that I have to like it. I mean, it's my name on the door. It's kind of my name on the invoice. I'm saying this is something that I think is really good and worth owning, and not just worth owning for a day, but worth owning long-term. That's going to be a good, you know, buy. Number two is it has to be actually well made. It has to be a good product. I am selling something physical. I'm not selling a JPEG. It has to be well made. So you can have the greatest concept in the world. You can have the greatest image in the world, but if the print itself is not good, then I'm not interested. Maybe there's four things. The third thing is that it needs to be things I think my collectors are looking for. It doesn't make any sense for me as a dealer to put up things that I can't sell, but it's not helping the artist either. It's giving them expense and, you know, something on their resume that they had to show, but my job is to sell the work. If I can't sell the work, it's not helping anyone. So I definitely take that part seriously. And then it has to be that I think I can work with the artist. I've definitely sent people's work back that I was selling a lot of just because they were so incredibly difficult. The artist-dealer relationship is usually very close, and it needs to be that it's somebody that doesn't make you insane, which I've definitely had artists that were at that level, where they just either weren't listening to me or just were responding very poorly to requests, either by me or from outsiders, from collectors. They weren't producing the work. They weren't getting it to me on time. I mean, as I said, if you want it to be your job, you need to treat it like a job. And that's it. That's all it needs to be for me to like it.
Yeah. Okay. You know, so I'm not seeing any questions in the comments at the moment. Matt, did you have any questions?
Yeah, a little bit of not a role play situation, but from a collector's perspective. I assume you have potential customers who come in who've never bought any lens-based imagery before. And so I'd like to ask you what I think is a question you've gotten before is, I've never bought any photography before. I'm kind of interested in it. What do you think I should do?
Right. So those are kind of my favorite people when they really do want to start collecting, because they're really excited still. You know, that they don't really know what direction they're going to go into and things like that, but that they are really thinking about collecting photography, not just buying one, but really want to collect it. Usually, you know, I try to figure out first what they actually really love. I don't ever want people to go home with things they only kind of like or aren't going to like in 2 years. There's nothing pushy about the kind of role I think a dealer should have. It needs to be that this is good for everybody, that the collector's happy, I'm happy, the artist is happy. It's, you know, very, very nice when that all works out. But the first time, a lot of times it's trying to figure out just what the collector really is interested in. Because people who've been collecting for a long time really know. They can come in and say, I am only interested in mid-century French street photography. What do you have? Easy. I can immediately go to that. But if someone comes in and goes, well, I kind of like color, but maybe black and white, but maybe small, but maybe really large. I'm not, then you're kind of like, okay, we got to get to something. Do you have a budget? Do you have, a special interest, anything like that? Because when you're only collecting kind of here and there, it doesn't become a space issue or anything like that. Collectors, once they get to a certain, usually number of prints that they own, they realize they're going to have to get specific, because otherwise, if they just keep buying everything they like, they're just going to, eat themselves out of house and home a little bit. So I definitely have collectors who I know their taste well enough that I can all but buy without even asking them, because I know what they like. And that's great, so, but there are definitely people who come in who've never bought a photograph before, don't understand it, don't understand the value. That was happening a lot more 20 years ago than it is now, thank God. So it used to be that everybody came in and they'd go, is this an original? And I'd go, there's no such thing as an original, and here's why. That because it's from a negative, what's original, right? Is the negative original? Not really, because it's not a photograph, so but now between printmaking and all of that, people kind of get it a little bit more. And photography is just so much more collected than it was in '99 when I started. Consequently, the values and prices have gone up, but still compared to other mediums, it's still kind of your best buy. You can get, let's say you spend $10,000 on a sculpture. It might be by somebody who's going nowhere. You don't know, it's contemporary artist. $10,000, you can get somebody, you can get a photograph by someone who's famous and dead. So, where there's an established market and where it's going. So it's also easier to store at the end of the day. It's flat. You're not, if you want to be a sculpture collector, you better have enough money and enough space to put those things someplace. Same thing with paintings to a certain extent. If you decide you want to switch it out, you can't really stick it in your closet or in a flat file. And a photograph you can put in a flat file. You can keep collecting without needing wall space or anything else. Yeah, so that's just another benefit.
Mentioning pricing, what is the range of prices in your gallery, and what is a typical average price?
So
let's do unframed pieces and framed.
So I'd say that my average sale at this point of a single piece is probably somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000, depending on what it is. There's a huge range of prices because, like Maggie Taylor, for example, her smallest ones are 8 inches and they start at 1,500, or they are 1,500 because she prices by size. Then she goes up to 36-inch prints, which are 8,000. So depending on your budget and the size you want, you've got a lot of range even per artist, which is really nice because I can sell really big pieces in Houston because we have big walls and a lot of space. I have to sell smaller pieces in New York. People just don't have those walls. But that's another great thing about photography is you have that option. You can say, oh, I really want a Maggie Taylor. I know exactly where it's going to go. So I know what size I need it to be. And there's that freedom, which is really, really nice. But also if you've got a budget, you can still have things. My artist, Patty Carroll, that I referenced earlier, her smallest are 15-inch and they start at 1,200. So, and then they go up to the really big ones are 38 inches and they're 4,500. So again, you've got a lot of room to play, and none of these are tiny. And we don't sell anything that's going to be, this size. And bigger does not mean better. That some things really are nice, small, they're intimate, and it just depends on what you want to see and the feeling you want, and just which one you like best. A lot of people buy really big things that are kind of, just red with one slice of white going through, and a lot of times, that stuff can get really, really boring if you live with it for a long time, but it's so big and it's so colorful that it makes a really big impact when you see it. But that doesn't mean long-term you're going to love it if you really have to stare at it every day. And so, again, the same way I said there's nothing pushy about it here, I want to make sure that people are going to love it for a long time, not buy it and then kind of bring it back in 6 months and go, I don't like this. So definitely you want to look at things that you think long-term you're going to love. That being said, if you buy something really great from me and want to sell it back or have a great photograph, please contact me. I will always be interested in seeing what you have.
That actually, I thought of another question because of course, as an artist, is like very important to like find your crowd in your market and everything as well. But then based on what you're saying, it seems like that's very important for like the gallery owner as well. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of galleries try to be kind of everything to everyone, which I think is kind of a misstep, because then why do I go to your gallery as opposed to somebody else's? You know, that my collectors in general like my taste and like my eye, and we sort of agree on things in general. So they buy from me a lot, you know, well, sometimes a lot, sometimes not, depends on the year. But that they come back because there is something in here that is specifically Catherine Couturier. Part of that is knowing my market, but as I said, I have to love it. It's not going to get in my gallery if I don't think it's great. And again, for an artist, I feel bad for artists a lot of times, because how do you even figure out which gallery would be a good fit for you? Because you need to look for a gallery that has work like yours, but not exactly like yours. It has to kind of overall fit. Because obviously that's what they have collectors for, and that's what the gallery owner likes. A lot of people will call me and say, oh, you don't have anything like what I've got, so you need it. And I'm like, no, that probably means I can't sell it. So, but that's tough to find something that looks kind of overall like what I've got, but isn't matchy and isn't derivative. So I do feel for artists in that way, because that's tricky. It's
So
tricky
like
to know.
the collectors, they do, I'd say most of your collectors, they have that come to you, like they already have an idea of kind of what it is that they want. They're looking for a certain type of work or piece. And then they know that they can come to you pretty much for that, because they know you're gonna have something like of that realm.
Exactly. And sometimes I just help people start their collections. And so I don't just sell them things that are in the gallery. I work again with my network of other dealers, and I can find stuff that they're going to like. And then we can kind of start from there. I go to art fairs. I was at Expo Chicago, looking around to see what I could find to buy. And I found some really, really great stuff. And then I sell at art fairs as well, where I can look through other dealers' bins and stuff like that and go, oh, I know which client would love this, or I know which client would love that.
Nice.
So I do get to shop for them as well, which is really, really fun. Really, really fun.
Okay, great.
But yeah, but usually people come to me because they like my taste, or they like the help I can give them, or kind of they just like me. I mean, snotty as that sounds, like Maggie Taylor's got other galleries, so collectors could buy from a different gallery and still get the same piece a lot of times. So usually they work with a dealer they like. Either they like the style, or they like the location, or they just like their personality better, or they find the dealer more helpful. So I try to keep all that in mind, not be snobby and all that, which I hate. And that's something I'm constantly trying to fight against in the art world, because that is definitely not how I run my gallery. Anyone can come in and look and ask questions, and you do not have to buy anything. And I'm just happy for people to come look.
Fantastic. I believe that about sums it up. I'm still not seeing any questions in the comments here, but like
that means I answered them all. I said everything anyone ever needed to know about fine art photography or Maggie Taylor. So way to go, me.
But, like I stated earlier, I think like I said, this is going to be on Facebook Live. We'll be on our YouTube page as well. And then, like us discussed earlier with you before we went live, about posting these in clips and small segments and things of that nature. So I think definitely once we do that, we can definitely see a lot more outreach. And of course, the goal is to bring attention, of course, to visual arts alliance, but then also bring attention to your gallery and then the artists that you're choosing to working with as well.
Great, awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. And yeah, everybody can come from 2 to 4 and meet Maggie Taylor in person, and me from 2 to 3:30 when I have to leave. So.
2 to 3:30. Okay.
Well, I'll be here until then. I'll be here until
okay.
3:30 if anybody wants to come say hi.
All right, yes. Well, thanks again for giving us a few minutes of your time and everything. Great presentation. It's great gallery. Maggie, she has some great work. I'll definitely check out some of her work as well. But again, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, and as promised at the beginning of the presentation, I said that at the end I'll give you an up-to-date what's going on in the organization. So we are in the middle of the first ever back-to-back Juried exhibitions, celebration of the return to live art events. We are mounting 2 exhibits back-to-back for the first time ever. I don't know anyone, especially any all-volunteer nonprofit, who has done this, but we're doing a membership show and an open show back-to-back. This Wednesday is the opening of the 38th Juried membership exhibition. It will be at Sabine Street Studios. The juror that worked with us is Lester Marks. He will be announcing the awards at 7 o'clock. Again, this is an in-person event. This is the first in-person exhibition we've had in just under 3 years. So I wonder how many people are going to come, but it's very exciting that we have this. And in 1 month, we will have the 38th Juried Open Exhibition reception. That will be in the same space, Sabine Street Studios. The juror that worked with or is working with us on that right now is Allison Dilly-McGreen, who is the curator of contemporary art at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. So it's a very interesting combination, having Lester as a juror who's a collector and Allison as a juror who is a high-level museum curator back-to-back. So I think it's really fun. I think it's very exciting. The works that Allison are looking at, we're going to be notifying artists beginning on April 24th. So if you entered, you'll know if you've been accepted into the show or not. But of course, everyone can come to the reception. The next time we can see each other in person is at our monthly critique night at Archway Gallery. That's on the 3rd Monday of every month. So just a little bit of an update. As always, the comments on our Facebook page are open to you. Our emails are open to you. And we look forward to seeing you soon. James, thanks for getting this organized, and to everyone else, see you later. Bye.
Peace.